Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Honkaistarrail is a team-based game of different shapes and sizes with their own advantages and disadvantages. Some teams are more favored than others, getting constant tuning passes while other teams are ignored to fight for themselves. This is the natural order of things, as you can create the illusion of power by making endgame bonuses be biased to certain archetypes, while in actual reality, they are more than equal without said bonuses. However, some teams are mechanically flawed that make them so weak they don't feel viable at all, and many units under that team get rarely used as a result and oftentimes disregarded. These teams are thrown all the way to the bottom of any tier list, labeled as doomed, until an angel falls from the sky and gives them bonuses to their specific traits that fixes them and throws them back to a fast track of success. This is the Kafka Theorem, showing how certain traits that make teams seem flawed or labeled doomed at worst can be fixed over time with new characters. This video is a historical overview of such units that follow this distinction and the advantages that came about their presence for the future. There's a lot to be said about monopath teams. The biggest factor as to why they were never seen as anything meta is because of the imbalances of team building when overlapping roles. 3 damage dealers of the same path aren't getting as much damage since nobody is buffing them. 3 supports can support each other to get a lot of buffs, but their scaling makes it a struggle. And let's not even mention sustain, where any sustain past a certain point does nothing for your team. There's just few benefits in HSR's path system, where overlapping roles is a good idea outside of the simulated universe, much less a better one than just mixing paths and balancing the roles. Until a certain black hole showed up. By design, Nihility was criticized for being a very confused path. Some are supports, others are sustain, others are DPS. The Nihility engulfs a lot of roles but is never the best at any of them. Debuffs are universal, but buffs are a lot stronger since harmonies cover multiple other useful things like speed and advance forward. And quite frankly, constantly applying debuffs before they expire offers comfort but nothing else. Being a mess of roles does allow you to run hypercarry-like teams, except you label all of them as Nihility teams. But they are oftentimes just weaker. This is when Acheron shows up and completely turns things on its head. In practically any situation, you don't really want a lot of Nihilities if at all, especially when you have the option of harmonies. But Acheron is so numerically strong that she makes mono Nihility worth it. She has brought more value to constant debuff application due to her energy mechanic. Thanks to her strength, she brings out value with oftentimes never the best picks like Pale or Gunaifen since they are SP positive and spam debuff. Without Acheron, I doubt Zhao Cho would even exist. Due to Acheron simply existing, future Nihilities will gain a lot more attention than they have ever gotten, elevating their value in pulse for whales and depths of teams for vets. The concept of Acheron elevating the path she is in also has carried over to a similar unit named Feixiao, who increases value of similar damage dealers like her that oftentimes but not always tread on the same path of the hunt. The underlying message I just told you there is Feixiao and Acheron's best partners would be another Feixiao and Acheron respectively, which is a complete antithesis of why path overlapping is not as effective. I wouldn't even be surprised that later on, mono sustains outside simulated universe will be a viable method through a playable character. Acheron and Feixiao have proven that simply requiring a trait to use an extremely powerful character is enough to bring a doomed team to greater strength. Kafka, the namesake of this theorem, is due to her being the first character that ended up punching a hole and making a team archetype relevant in the meta from the jaws of mediocrity, doing it in possibly the most effective way possible, as Kafka is known to be. DOT before Kafka was Sampo, Himeko, Serval, and Book. Those were some dark times, I'll just tell you that. Conceptually, DOT failed a lot on release due to a number of factors. Obviously, the lack of characters is one, but liking characters by itself is fine as long as the mechanic is good. And boy, I'll tell you, DOT was not good. Even ignoring the outright flawed numbers, DOT didn't reward fast teams since reapplying DOT didn't need you to be fast and they weren't doing a lot of damage on their turn anyway. What ended up happening was DOT becoming somewhat a bizarro version of counter teams that was basically only ever used in simulated universe and was a meme otherwise. Compared to the actual counter DPS like Clara, their ceiling was much lower as they weren't critting at all. They couldn't take much advantage of the hypercarry meta either due to their dual DPS nature, and their inherent stat line making buffs like attack more saturated and crit damage outright useless. Kafka's release at 1.2 did the simplest fix you could imagine. Just make DOT damage happen on your own turn. As I've discussed in previous videos, this by itself was a lot better since you could control your speed to increase and trigger more damage instances, while previously DOT being only locked to enemy speed means you have very little control over your own damage. Being tied to enemy speed outright gimped synergies with enemy breaks, which DOT actually did like. Kafka fixed all those little demons and made DOT the archetype that it's known for today. DOT these days is known as using a huge amount of speed, and Kafka being a need for effectively doubling DOT damage on the principle of being able to trigger it by herself. Even if a better version of Kafka rolls around, stacking both is going to be the more likely possibility. With future releases of supports like Ron May covering other weaknesses of DOT from the numbers perspective, Kafka's mechanic makes every DOT character released so far increase our value, since DOT damage itself cannot exist in a comfortable state without Kafka or the literal Aeon from Simulated Universe. It's worth noting that DOT still is far from done, and the brief period of its peak will come back someday, as some niches can still be filled out, like maybe a healer that has a DOT, or something similar. Whatever DOT throws its way though, Kafka has proven that changing how damage is produced is enough to bring a doomed team to greater strength. You might not actually be surprised that I didn't mention Kafka last as the namesake of this theorem. While Kafka was the first character that brought an entire team style to the table, her Stellaron test tube baby made the strongest example of it and practically bended subgame rules. The break playstyle before Harmony MC was a very underbaked mechanic that was either just not that important, used as a MacGuffin to drive crit-based mechanics, or had anti-synergies. Sushang didn't spend SP and got faster if the enemy was broken, but break by itself didn't make most of her damage. Shuei's shredding toughness fueled her follow-up, but she didn't actually desire a long break state. Himiko wanted breaks, but didn't care about the nuance of break itself and just needed it for charges for her crit-based follow-up. The only break character that actually did give it some edge over other teams and revolved their damage around it without contradicting the playstyle was Luca, and even then he was never considered meta. The primary reason for this was simple. Break was heavily undertuned and was harder to use for less reward. Break itself was flawed due to the break effect stat. Since it only affects the damage of the actual character that did the break, building more than one character with break effect was a loss and plain ineffective. At the very least, you can run break effect on supports like Silverwolf, but that would actually break your energy regen. Another glaring flaw of break was being too inconsistent. The damage would be awful if the enemy isn't broken yet, it would spike when the enemy is broken, and then immediately drop off a cliff afterwards, compared to the crit DPS that was non-stop, slightly smaller spikes. Lastly, precise gameplay was also needed to gauge the correct breaker at what optimal time for a break-based team. Playing normal break to Harmony MC using super break was almost night and day and fixed most nagging flaws that break as a whole had. Break effect was now useful on any party member, even your healer, and high amounts of toughness damage like Shui and Sushang used it for more than just a tool and directly translated it into higher damage. Super break damage widened the period of high damage for break teams, instead of just the initial break and the ensuing break DOT as your damage spike. The enemy will now suffer from huge HP losses just by being inside the break state itself. This elevated Himiko, who would start to struggle once her follow-up stopped proccing. And for good and bad, Super Break made doing break damage a lot more simple. While it would still be optimal, you won't be losing as much for missing breaks with Boot Hill for example, and even Luca can still be used with shoddy gameplay. Harmony MC also had an indirect effect on Nihility, since break itself is unconventional and requires debuffs to be stronger. Units like Silverwolf, who specialize in enemy weaknesses and has a fair share of toughness damage, got a lot out of Harmony MC. Pela was a decent free-to-play alternative, and you can even run a simpler version of Luca. This allowed Nihility to rise in value and be used over often stronger harmonies in a meta team as both a carry and an enabler. Harmony MC opened up such a unique team structure in which everyone did damage. Every toughness damage on the team actually matters, and made a once clunky stat actually compete with the likes of crit and attack scalers. A lot of people would accurately assess that Harmony MC saved break effect in general, and I even forgot to mention how low investment all of this is. The team is just that strong and special. Regardless of how you feel about how fun Harmony MC is in practice, they are probably the only contender of a unit that legitimately changed the game, boosting a clunky stat, buffing weaker damage dealers, and buffing weaker supports. Putting all of their benefits together, Harmony MC punched through the once clunky break style, enabling a doomed team to become meta and outright near necessary due to the introduction of Apocalyptic Shadow. It's likely that we will get a limited super break enabler like Harmony MC in the future, but even still, nothing can take away the fact that Harmony MC is living proof that a unit can revive so many traits. Break and associated mechanics usually meant clunky or was outright ignored, but Harmony MC made these traits so powerful that Harmony MC out-Kafka'd Kafka in her own theorem. Wow, that was kind of a tongue twister. Anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. Comment down below do all the algorithm stuff. Thank you to my members, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.